My name is Fallon, and I've decided to do my podcast for global issues on the major international treaties on climate change. So, first I have the UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. That one's not a treaty, but it's a yearly convention to discuss climate change. It aims to prevent having problems with climate change in the future, and there's 198 countries involved. Although this one's not a treaty or a law, I do think it's still important to mention, and without this, we wouldn't have the next couple of things we are going to talk about, as in the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement. So the UNFCCC was a pretty big step for climate action. The Paris Agreement was adopted by 196 parties at the 21st UNFCCC. It went into effect on November 4th, 2016, and its goal is to keep global temperatures down below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Countries submit NDCs, which are nationally determined contributions, to help reduce the impacts of climate change, and countries also submit LTLEDs, which stands for Long-Term Low-Emission Development, which is just long-term solutions to climate change. With the Paris Agreement, richer countries also provide money for poorer countries for things climate-related. This is called climate finance mitigation. And so far, with the Paris Agreement, carbon neutrality targets have been established, and we now have a competitive zero-carbon solution. Well, multiple competitive zero-carbon solutions. Next is the Kyoto Protocol. It went into effect on February 16th, 2005. There's 192 parties involved. It's for developed countries only. I do like that because developed countries are the ones who are mostly responsible for greenhouse gas emissions. I do think that it's important that we acknowledge that they are more responsible than some of the poorer countries, so they should be providing more to fix that and to provide solutions for that. So I do really like that about this. They do 5-year commitment periods. And the Doha Amendment was made for the second commitment period. It had new requirements and commitments. With the Kyoto Protocol, they also monitor emission goals with registry systems, international transaction logs, and compliance systems. So for both the Paris Agreement and the Kyoto Protocol, I do really like both of them a lot. I think that they've both been huge for climate change, and I think we would be really far off compared to fixing things if we didn't have both of those, so I do really like them. Next is the Basel Convention, which is the control of transboundary movements of hazardous waste. This was adopted on March 22nd, 1989, so it's pretty old. Its goal is to protect people and the environment from the effects of hazardous waste, and it mainly focuses on reduction of hazardous waste and restrictions of transboundary movement. So with the Basel Convention, they provide training and technology, and they've so far developed waste streams and policy instruments. This is pretty old, but I do think that it's necessary to have, and although it's kind of dated, I do think without it we would probably be struggling and have a lot of hazardous waste around. So I think this is pretty important as well. Next I have the Montreal Protocol. Its goal is to protect the ozone layer, which is really important because our ozone layer is being ruined on a daily basis with all the pollution in the atmosphere, and without that, the sun would probably kill us. So I do think that this was super big to have something that's goal is to protect the ozone layer. Its responsibilities are to control the ozone-depleting substances in the air. So things like pollution, they're just working on how much of that we're producing and, all that stuff. It also controls ozone-depleting substances imports and exports. And then it also has a multilateral fund, which is money being provided to the developing countries to pay for things related to climate change. This was implemented by the United Nations Environmental Program, the United Nations Developmental Program, the United Nations Industrial Development Org, and the World Bank. They have an executive committee and a secretariat to oversee the funds and where it's going and everything like that. And so far with the Montreal Protocol, they've supported over 8.6 thousand projects that are worth around $4 billion. I do like the multilateral fund because it has helped show that the developing countries care and they do want to help. They just don't necessarily have what it takes to provide for that. So I do think it's nice that they can all play their part and be helpful. So far, the ozone should be on set to recover by 2050, which is pretty soon, honestly. And that's really good because if we didn't have this protocol, the ozone layer would be getting worse and worse and worse. Like, we don't know how much longer the Earth would have with the ozone layer. Also, it's phased out 98% of ODS compared to the 1990 levels. So the Montreat Protocol has been a big contribution to protect the climate, and it's been very successful so far. These are my references. It just kind of goes in order of everything I used. And then thank you for watching. I do really appreciate it if you've made it this far, whether you're a peer or my professor, obviously, but or even just someone finding this on YouTube. But climate change is something that's really important to me. I do want to do something with that in the future, so I was really excited to make this and get to do research and learn more about some things and hopefully teach you also some more about some things. So, yeah, thank you for watching.